Let me invite to the stage Dr. Marshall Summar, CEO of Uncommon Cures, to talk about 1 in a million. Thank you very much, Marshall. How are you, buddy? Good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
Thank you. It's been a long time.
It has been.
So, let's see here. We have had some fun. Have you heard any of it?
I have heard a little bit of it.
Okay.
I'm waiting for my AI to start nagging me.
Oh yeah. Well, I have Lindy. Anybody have Lindy? Okay, you don't. I'm a kind of AI Lindy. I mean, the truth is, I had a fantastic assistant. Her name is Sammy. She left. She went to Politico. She wanted to be in journalism. And I said, look, I'll do all the things. But she left. Anyway, I went online. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out an AI agent that would satisfy my needs. And I have Lindy now instead of Sammy. And Lindy does a pretty damn good job, but Lindy nags me constantly.
Oh, yeah.
Like I now have to tell it, stop being so efficient, because it's leaving me no space for me to be me. But anyway, look, you are a leading figure in rare disease care and research. And we've talked a little bit about this. We had John Crowley up here sort of talking about it. You know, the cards are so stacked against rare disease ecosystem in so many ways. But it's vital and important. And you know, when I think about the promise of AI, drug discovery and research, I don't understand, we were talking about it earlier, why the micro needs of the system don't become more of a norm as opposed to a boutique.
I'd say some of it's because we're playing catch up a little bit because it's a field that has moved so quickly. You know, when I started off back in the 80s, we could diagnose a couple of hundred things tops. We're looking at 16,000 rare diseases now. And
yeah, I mean, part of it is it's not rare.
Yeah, it's not rare. Yeah,
my notes say 30 million Americans.
Yeah.
So
it's the other column. You know, whenever you fill in a survey and you say, you know, the most common answer is actually usually in other. Well, that's kind of what rare disease is. It's other. A lot of different conditions, but a lot of commonalities. And I would say the things we're trying to catch up on is both our healthcare, our regulatory systems are really designed around big disease, big health, which is appropriate. That's where we started from. Now we're getting disease groups where maybe there's one patient, there may be 5 patients. And so the models really start to flip, both from a care standpoint.
Can I ask you an unkind question? Is this MFN thing we've been talking about really screwing you over because your economy of scale is very different than the big players? I am right? I'm just guessing.
Yeah, no, I mean, our economy scale is very different. So, you know, when you look at investment in building out new rare disease drugs, you take that 16,000, there's probably only a couple of hundred that would have what you would call a classically economically viable population size, PKU, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell disease. The majority of them are really starting to fall into that range where you've got to look at new economic models where you're either bundling groups together, things like that. And we're starting to see more of that. The other thing we're seeing is the patients are starting to drive the bus. And in some ways, that's kind of appropriate because it takes so long to get these things through. And if there's not a huge economic incentive for developing a drug for 10 people, there is for those families, though. And they're actually getting pretty good at organizing.
Can you, without divulging things we shouldn't know, give us an example, a story of one of your successes?
I'll give you one in the news. Baby KJ up at CHOP.
Yeah.
So baby KJ has a defect in carbamyl phosphate synthetase type 1, which there'll be a quiz later and you're all supposed to remember that. But it's a very rare urea cycle disorder. It's only a handful of patients. It's the gene I actually worked with. But they actually developed a therapy, built out the method of delivery, built out the reagents to do it for one patient. And that's what we would call that sort of a hero project. In other words, you're trying to see, can we actually do this? The question is, how do you make that sustainable across multiple small disease groups? And I think what we're going to see is more and more what I would call platforms, where maybe different diseases with some commonality and a commonality of therapy, but you're sort of bundling those together.
And so who pays for that?
That's a great question. The economics is interesting because these therapies do tend to reduce the cost of care for these patients. So let's take baby KJ just as an example. Urea cycle disorder, which is what his basic category was, is a field that patient will have lifetime hospitalizations, probably require a liver transplant.
Right.
Chronic medications that can cost a couple $100,000 a year, whereas with one treatment that was pretty costly at the time, but much, much less than that area under the curve for long term. It's one of the reasons why gene therapy is still kind of looked at favorably when you can, because you're trading area under the curve. One very expensive thing, but over time you may get a significant cost reduction. And then there's also the quality of life issues too. This is a kid that will have a much better quality of life than he would have.
Is the FDA friend or foe?
I was there yesterday. I would say friend, with a caveat. So the FDA has got a lot of restrictions and a lot of history that they are trying to overcome from that. But remember, it's designed around big-scale drugs. So one of the things I would say is we're trying to sort of fit a round peg in a square hole because the evidentiary standards, the trial designs are very, very different for rare disease where you have very few patients than if you have a lot. Janet Woodcock and I just published a couple of papers on this and really trying to get folks to think of it, not that you're being flexible or you're lowering the bar, you're just using the most appropriate science for that. And I would say the FDA is making a very good faith effort to do that.
So 5 years ago, I interviewed the deputy administrator of the FDA, and she said they were trying to make rare diseases more of a priority. I never followed up
They are.
to see if they were actually doing something, systematically different in that space. So you're saying they are.
They are, and
So she was truthful.
You got to remember too, 50% of the drugs approved every year have an orphan designation. Now, a chunk of that's cancer drugs because those have a lot of orphan in there, but the rest are these, out of this pool of 16,000. So I would say the progress has been steady. I think there are some next steps to take where they kind of really systemize how do you do these different populations, things like that.
So, John Crowley, you know John Crowley.
I know John well.
John
Yeah.
Crowley. So John Crowley, we heard his story there. It's very powerful. The thing that just occurs to me listening to you and other people about the economics of it, I'm being told that it's improving, the capital investment side of it is, but I'm just wondering how much great science has been just by circumstance, not being aligned with money. Good stuff was achieved that might be game-changing, save people's lives, that we've just cast off into the gutter.
A lot. One thing to remember from the regulatory process alone, there's this thing called type 1 and type 2 error. Type 1 means is you don't want to let something through that wasn't real. So in other words, we call it false positive. Type 2 error is what we call false negative. That's where you actually didn't let something through that was actually going to work, but the barrier was too high to cross over. And the FDA is really designed around watching for type 1 error and not looking for those false negatives. And that's something where I think better designs, things like that. That's one of the reasons the families are stepping in. A lot of family organizations saying, we're tired of waiting 10 to 20 years when we know there's a theory around what a therapy that would work for us is. We're going to push it forward. So we're seeing a lot of families doing that.
Are health-directed AI platforms, LLMs, able to supercharge some of this rare disease research process?
Yes. Interestingly enough, the field of medical genetics, which is what my background is, we've been using machine learning, which we lovingly still call it, since the 80s and 90s because the field was so complex. When the sequencing came
Why didn't you call and tell me that? We could have done this before Claude did. Or something.
I was a wee lad at the time, but what we found is when you're looking at these new sequence correctors, like KJ and the others, you really need something that can crunch massive amounts of data to look to see what's the best fit, what's not going to have off-target effects, all of those things. So we used to do that by hand. Now we can actually do it and look at all the possibilities very quickly and start to optimize the process.
That's what Jonathan Epstein was saying. You didn't hear him. Penn Med, he was going through and saying he was genetic sequencing by hand.
Yeah, that's what I used to do in my laboratory.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was privileged to be part of the Human Genome Project, and it really was by hand. It was incredibly slow. Now, what would have taken us 5 to 10 years, you can do in a day.
So in the bold bet spirit here today, if you were to say, hey, let's gamble on one big new thing, near-term win, what would it be?
I would say the new delivery systems for genetic material. Historically, we've tried to use viruses, adeno-associated adenovirus, lentivirus, take your pick. the human body's really good at saying no to those things. The lipid nanoparticles basically mean you're putting these things in a drop of fat. Lipid nanoparticle sounds really cool, but it's basically putting it in a drop of fat. And it's a well-designed drop of fat, and then that will get into the cells much better, and you can redose. That's the thing I would say. And we do a lot of clinical trials in my program, and I'd say those are the things I see that are the most promising right now.
Are you going to stay until 5?
I can't.
Oh, you can't. Can you stay 20 more minutes?
I can stay 20 more minutes.
Can you sit over there?
Sure.
Right,
Right there?
No, on that end of the couch, right?
Okay, I can do that.
You can just move over there.
Okay.
But just in advance, give Dr. Marshall Summar, CEO of Uncommon Cures, a big round of applause for taking it down. Now, I want you to stay up here.
All right.
Because it turns out, Marshall, I like you way more than I was expecting to. No, I'm just, but I want to bring somebody else to join our conversation because I think it would be relevant to what she's been doing. But please welcome to the stage in my show, Priyanka Agarwal, who's the co-founder and CEO of HealthX. Priyanka, thanks for joining us here today. Priyanka, meet Marshall. He's going to hang out. You don't mind sharing the stage a little bit with him, huh? Nice to see you. Thank you.
I promise I'll be quiet.
No, I mean, I just think that a lot of what Priyanka is doing, which I find, again, part of the revolution, right? If you want to have a revolution, you got to have data, you got to know what you do. There has to be accountability in this system, and you've got to figure out, new ways to do things. And I sort of find that the real, I've been monitoring stuff on precision medicine for years and years and years. I don't think we've been walking the walk of it. We've been talking the talk. So I think part of it is how do you begin doing it? And I think the real bold bet here is if you're not able to take all these macro tools, these huge things, and make them work at an individual level, then we're kind of missing what this is all about. And tell me where I'm wrong, Priyanka.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me.
No,
awesome
great to have you.
Conversation,
Yeah.
Awesome day. Just briefly, so folks know a little bit about me, I'm a physician and internist, so cared for really sick folks in the hospital for 15 years at UCSF out in California. Subsequent to that, I was part of an incredible team at a biotech called Myocardia, so really kind of lived the rare disease world. We were part of a team that developed a therapy for a rare inherited cardiomyopathy.
I didn't even know that this is even going to be a better relationship than I thought.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I would say both of those lived experiences as a physician caring for patients and then in the drug discovery world, I saw so much opportunity to empower patients with their own health data. So in the hospital, I'd be caring for folks in the ICU in the middle of the night. Somebody would arrive with little more than a photocopied discharge summary. You're waiting 1 to 2 weeks to get their biopsy results. They're waiting to start cancer therapy. So I think all of us as patients and caregivers have been in that situation.
So just give people a snapshot of HealthX. My understanding, because I haven't played. I mean, I will go on and get whatever you're doing, and we'll see what it costs me. Maybe it's free, whatever. I don't know.
Free, yeah.
But I mean, you've created an Apple Wallet, right? Of my own health
Absolutely.
data, which I stupidly don't have, right? I'm
That's right.
talking about health stuff, but I have no idea what my health data is. So thanks for shaming me in a way. So, and indirectly shaming.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say, those lived experiences as a physician and then on the drug discovery side, I thought there was a huge unlock waiting here for the consumer to really be driving their health journey, using their health data in interesting ways. And so what we've built at HealthX is essentially the capability for any person to access and share their health records at the moments that matter.
Right.
And to your point, that is organized like an Apple Wallet for your health data. So the idea is you access your data once and then you never have to do it again. That data is kept up to date for you by HealthX. You permission where you want to share it. You can turn off those connections at any point in time. And so today we work with just an amazing set of organizations. We work with some of the big AI teams. HealthX is live today in Claude, in Copilot Health. We work with some amazing digital health teams like Whoop, 23andMe. We're working with some of the biggest health plans nationally, provider teams. And so the idea is that, in 2026, we want the individual to be the connective tissue and to be the driver of their health, not institutions. And I would say, if you look at the history of US healthcare, it has been so institution-centric, which, I understand why as a physician, but in 2026, I think There's a lot of frustration in the way that all of us access our healthcare. There's so many access problems.
How are people, I don't know whether we're vibing with this. I was watching, I mean, one of your partners is 23andMe, and I remember when, was it Ann Wojcicki, the CEO, was going through this. She ended up buying back her bankrupt company.
Yep.
But in the process of the company possibly being bought, the worry was in California that people's personal genetic information would somehow be available or abused, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I had an account there, and I deleted my account. Somebody said, delete
I did mine too.
Did you delete your account? Then she bought it back, and I like her, and I said, damn, I deleted my account, because I sort of trusted her, but not others in the process. But you could feel that there was this palpable fear and anxiety that people had about their genetic data being out there. How are they trusting what you're doing in a way that was different than what was like in the 23andMe world?
So, what's interesting is I came to this space because as a physician, I was personally shocked by the way that all of our de-identified data is bought and sold in a daily manner, and that's perfectly legal. And my thinking was, gosh, I think many patients, many of us would be fine with our data being used for good, particularly if we have a disease in our family that's very serious. But there was just no mechanism in place to ask patients, ask consumers, hey, how do you want to use your data? And so I think you really hit on a very important theme that HealthX strives to deliver against, which is trust. I think in 2026, people are happy for their data to be used again in meaningful ways, but I think people want awareness, they want control, they want to know how their data is being used and by whom. And that, I think, trusted partner is where HealthX really wants to sit with the individual.
Yeah, so the bridge with Marshall here is one that I think exists in a way where, I sort of feel, so I feel exactly like you do on the data, my data in particular. I am narcissistic about my data. But the thing I think is important is that if my data could help solve a rare disease challenge, I would like it to be in that mix. And so I don't know how the regime is set up.
Yeah.
What I will tell you is that 10 years ago, I found an incredible amount of unwillingness of large sort of cancer centers to share data with other cancer centers. And one would say, oh, they're trying to protect their patient. I thought they were protecting their commercial interests. And so one of the things, I don't know how it's evolved, is whether or not there's enough data out there, enough personal data, maybe disassociated data, that we're actually, Marshall, able to achieve some things with AI, like Iceland achieved by genetically coding all of its population, or are we still living in a balkanized data world that's going to inhibit your success?
I think it's still a balkanized world, and a lot of that has to do with some of the EHR systems, things like that, that don't really want to be too portable from that standpoint. What you're doing is absolutely spot on from that standpoint, where it's the old 90-10 rule. 90% of folks, if you ask them, are probably willing to share their data for research purposes, to help society, things like that. And people have kind of tested those waters, and it's probably much higher than 90. But there's always that 10%, and things get designed around that smaller group than they do around the bigger group, which creates a lot of roadblocks for pulling data, getting it across borders, so to speak. Even hospitals with the same EHR system can't really share data back and forth unless those are plugged and connected together. So the solution you have, which is you pull it out and you put it in the hands of the patients, really is the one that I think makes the most sense. For rare diseases, incredibly important, because let's say you go to an emergency room and you're in a state you don't live in and you've got a rare disease and you walk in there and nobody knows what the heck you have. But if you've got something, you say, here it is. Here's what I've got. Here's my usual treatment plan. Here's my care team you can contact. That's incredible.
Priyanka, one of the things I'm interested in is once you get the data, say, I'm going to pretend to be me, and I have HealthX, and I'm taking GLP-1 drugs, and I'm kind of looking for what the positive impacts are on my health profile over time.
Yeah.
One of the things I hate about the health profession is that I've got to go to a doctor or some kind of soothsayer to tell me how it may be improving different categories of my health and what a model of improvement would look like. It's gobbledygook to me. And I'm just wondering, are we moving far enough forward that as we are, say if I'm making progress with GLP-1, am I making progress on other dimensions that aren't just weight, but they are, what we were talking about, other potential, health challenges, and getting a picture and being informed by that health X or by that agent that in fact, oh, you're making progress here, or oh, you're not here.
Absolutely.
Because, I'm in One Medical, and have that, I do this stuff, but I hate it. I really don't like, I'm not a very doctor-friendly kind of guy, despite my demeanor. And I just get all this data, and I don't know how to read it, and whatever, and it kind of forces you to go back to why you went online and telehealth anyway, but they force you back into the brick and mortar system. So how is the interface on that front going?
Yeah, so I think you hit on a core theme, which is traditionally in healthcare, you as a patient have to go to One Medical. You have to go to the formal healthcare system. And I think many people are in your shoes where that may not be convenient for them, or maybe that's not where they're managing their everyday health. So a big part of the HealthX model is we want to show up for people in the moments that matter wherever they're spending that time. So, maybe you're more likely to check your Whoop app every day and, look to see what your daily indicators of health are. And so one of the things we're doing is, we're powering the Whoop experience. So you could pull in your One Medical data into Whoop and understand through AI, hey, what do my labs actually mean?
Right.
And that's something that I hear a lot from patients. I talked to somebody recently, he's a stage 4 lung cancer patient. He goes to UCSF. He gets a huge list of labs every 3 weeks with his chemotherapy. He's been ingesting all of that data into Claude using HealthX, and he says, gosh, for the first time, I actually understand what those labs mean. So I think that type of empowerment around taking down some of the asymmetry that exists in healthcare where, the doctor or the nurse knows what your health history means, but oftentimes for the patient, it's really confusing because you have all these scientific terms and labs. And so that type of information asymmetry, I think AI does a really nice job of. Now, AI isn't going to fully replace your doctor, nor are we advocating for that, but I do think that in terms of meeting people where they're at, making it convenient, providing them with information so they have greater understanding, these are all awesome things that AI can do. And I think our intent at HealthX is we want those AI experiences to be personalized to you. So we don't want you to be getting generic information off the web, but if that AI experience is really informed by your personal health history, our intent is that that's going to be a safer, more effective experience.
Have you ever thought of a partnership with Uncommon Cures?
We'd love
should
to.
talk.
Yeah,
we
we
should.
should. We certainly are working with several kind of rare disease groups that are looking to do things like setting up a registry.
Yeah.
When I was at Myocardia, gosh, it was millions of dollars for a few thousand patients to stand up a registry.
Right.
With HealthX, you ask the consumer to share their records, you can stand it up. And
Marshall?
We need to connect you with the NORD, National Organization for Rare Disorders I Am Rare program.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we're looking at now is the classic rare disease natural history is you fill out a paper form, you fill out all of these questions, and you miss the things you don't know. Whereas with an interactive system like you're promoting, you can actually start to find those things out. Back to your question a second ago, why isn't it moving faster? We are a litigious society, and there's always that, oh, what if it's wrong? And who's going to be responsible for that? Because it's going to be wrong. I mean,
Right.
so is your doctor, so is your nurse, so is almost anyone. But I think what I've seen, that's still kind of one of the choke points that a lot of these things have to travel through. I don't know if you found that true or not, but.
Yeah, I think a nice analogy for thinking about AI in medicine is really what's going on with self-driving cars.
Right.
And a lot of concerns initially, but as the wealth of data comes in, I think there's a lot of good to come from safety on the roads from AI. I had my older parents turn on self-driving on their Tesla in the last year after seeing all of that data. And so, I think it's still early days for the impact of AI in healthcare, but I think the hope is that it's going to make healthcare more consumer-centric, it's going to make it easier. And, I say this as a clinician, we don't want islands. We don't want people to be deciding their healthcare on their own with just AI, but I think what AI can do is make the patient more informed, make that first visit with a doctor more informed if a patient is coming in with their health records with a clear set of questions to ask. And so,
So cool what you're doing.
Yeah.
Are you going to have a drink with me at 5?
absolutely.
Great. Round of applause for Priyanka. Don't leave. I mean, I'm very pleased. Marshall, you're going to miss out.
I know.
Let's give a big round of applause to Marshall Summar, CEO of Uncommon Cures. Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate you coming.